We have looked at the word behold, and we've previously looked at the definitions being to pay attention to perceive, and today we're going to look at the third definition, to gaze upon. I think about the things that we see versus we actually see. We actually slow down long enough to gaze upon and to notice it. Have you ever been driving by somewhere, maybe in your community, where all of a sudden one day there's a new business, there's a new fast food restaurant, there's a new something, and you kind of drive by and go, where'd that come from? Like, when did they build that? You know, you've been so busy just flying by it, you haven't even noticed that they're building it. Or if you noticed it at some point, it didn't stand out to you because you didn't slow down enough to gaze upon it, to notice what was happening, and then all of a sudden it was there. Well, I think that we can get really busy going to church. Please do, please go to church. Going to church, you know, singing about Jesus, hearing about Jesus, clapping, that was great, that was wonderful, let's go, you know, whatever. And we kind of get in the motion of all of this that we can be guilty of not stopping long enough to gaze upon Jesus, to lock eyes with Jesus and to get to know Him and to learn all about Him and to just gaze upon Him and see Him and love Him more and more. And so looking today at behold, the gift of Christmas, we're looking at the definition to gaze upon. It says in Luke chapter 2, continuing on in the story of Christmas, we are now in the section about the shepherds, and it says in Luke 2:10, then the angel said to them, do not be afraid, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. For there is born to you this day in the city of David a Savior, who is Christ the Lord. And this will be the sign to you, you will find a babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. In this passage, the angel says to them, behold, I bring you good tidings. He's saying, behold, here I am. I've got some news to share with you. And then he was telling them to go find the babe in the manger. He was telling them to go gaze upon. Don't just go pay your respects. Don't just go and, oh, isn't this lovely? Oh, what a cute little baby. Oh, no. He was saying, go gaze upon, see, perceive, behold, pay attention to this babe in the manger, because this is Christ the Lord. This is a huge gaze upon moment. You know, don't just hear the news, go see Him and gaze upon Him. I think about that old song that says, turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in His wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of His glory and grace. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Gaze upon Jesus. About 5 years ago, my mother-in-law passed away, and when she passed away, it had been probably close to a year since I had literally physically seen her. For whatever reason, we hadn't gotten up there, and she became ill and was in the hospital, ended up passing away. I was able to visit with her over the phone those days leading up to her passing, but I hadn't actually seen her lately. And so when she passed, my husband and I, of course, threw everything in the car and we headed up to Michigan, where they live, to be with the family and to help get all the preparations made for the Celebration of Life service. And we went to the church, and that morning of the service, when everybody was coming, we got there early to get final things pulled together. And when we pulled up to the church, I went into the church sanctuary and I was setting my stuff down on the back pew. My husband had gone off into another room to find his brother, and they were doing various things to get stuff ready. And I walked into the sanctuary, and there was no one in there. The lights were on. There was no one in there. I was setting my stuff on the back row. And as I set my stuff down, I just looked up and I noticed that in the front of the room, in this huge sanctuary, was Mom. Was the casket, and Mom's body was lying in the casket. Now look, I know Mom wasn't there. Mom was a believer in Jesus. The minute she took that last breath, she was in heaven. All her pain was gone. All her problems were gone. Joy unspeakable, everlasting peace. I mean, her problems were over. So I knew Mom wasn't there, but in the natural, remembering that I haven't seen her for at least a year, I looked up and I saw the casket in the front and I was like, that's Mom. Mom's up front. I remember, again, being in the room totally by myself, and I made my way to the front of the room and I went to the casket and I stood at the side of the casket, and they already had the lid up and all of the flower arrangements, ready for people to come and to see her that day. I stood at the edge of her casket and I looked down into the casket and I looked at the face of a woman that I know. I know this woman. My husband and I now, we've been married 30 years, but at this time we would have been married about 25 years. So for 25 years, I have spent time with this woman. I knew her. As I looked at her face, although she wasn't there and her body was lifeless and cold, and they had done the makeup and made her look beautiful in that casket, as I looked at her face, everything about it was totally normal. The little mole right in her hairline, I've seen that mole for 25 years. The way her eyebrows were, just the way they laid, everything in her eyebrows looked normal to me. Every part of her face looked normal. If you said to me, oh, her eyes are green, I would, oh, no, I know what color her eyes are because I've looked at them for 25 years. I have sat on the love seat with this woman, turned sideways, face to face, talking about the next recipe we were going to try, talking about some new lipstick we were going to get, talking about the way we washed our face, whatever the conversations were. I had spent time with this woman, not to mention I had spent countless hours in her kitchen learning about how she cooks and what she does because she was an excellent cook. I know this woman. I know her. Do you know how I know her? Because I've spent time with her. As I stood there in this moment, I thought about that song, Look Full in His Wonderful Face. I was standing there looking, tracing every hairline, tracing the way her glasses set on her face, tracing everything. I looked down at her hands and the way her hands looked. Everything about her was normal. I was used to it. Because I knew her, I knew this woman, and I stood there looking full in her face, knowing that I know her, and no one could sway me about anything about her. You could walk up and say anything about her that wasn't true, and nope, you're not going to convince me, because I know this woman, because I've spent time gazing upon her. How much more so should we gaze upon the face of our Savior? How much more should we know Him so deeply that when someone comes up and says, well, God really is this or that, or, God's really mean, or God's really that, we're able to go, oh, no, see, I know Him because I have spent time with Him. I have sat in His presence and I have locked eyes with Him. I have gazed upon Him and I know Him. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in His wonderful face. And all the things of life, they grow strangely dim in the light of His glory and His grace. When we truly determine to gaze upon Him, to behold Him, everything else falls by the wayside. Everything else becomes dim in His light. What we focus on becomes bright. Even in a darker room, if I fix my eyes on something, the thing I'm looking at becomes the thing I see, even though everything else is really dark in the room. We get to choose what we focus on today and every day. We get to choose what we focus on. Like shining a flashlight on something that you're trying to see. We get to choose what we shine our focus on. We get to make that choice today. Choose today to move your focus to Jesus, not on the cares of life. Look, I know the cares are there. I know. I have my own list of cares. They are still there. But I get to choose to focus on those things, or to shift my focus and lift my eyes heavenward and look to Him. Focus on Him. Gaze upon Him. Get to know Him. Spend time in His Word. Even in this busy holiday season, make time for Jesus. Carve out time for Jesus. When we know Him, we gaze upon Him. We behold Him. We will drop to our knees and we will worship Him. Even if we can't physically in certain moments drop to our knees, our heart posture can be that we drop to our knees and we worship Him. So my challenge to you this week is to gaze upon Him. Gaze upon Him. We've already talked about the challenge to pay attention. Get your radar up, get your antenna up and pay attention. See how He's moving, how He's working, what He's doing. See the moments that He places you in situations where you can do something about it. Perceive what He's doing. Perceive how He's moving in your life. Perceive the situation beyond just your human nature. Perceive it. Sit in His presence and pay attention. And then today I just say, gaze upon Him. Sit in the quiet of a moment. Get up a little earlier if you have to and just gaze upon Him. Sit in His presence and gaze upon His face. How do you do that? You focus your attention on Him. You focus your thoughts on Him. Sit in His presence. Let His presence just take over your life and take over your circumstances. Purpose in your heart today to behold, to gaze upon this incredible, wonderful, matchless gift of Christmas, Jesus.